Voters of the Morristown Area. Welcome to everyone who's here tonight in person and those of you who are here watching us on YouTube. The League of Women Voters looks forward to a day when everyone has the right, the knowledge, the desire, and the confidence to participate in our democracy. To that end, our League strives to inform and educate our community about issues and hot topics. This evening's panel will attempt to educate us on the Freedom to Read Act, a bill that was introduced earlier this year and is currently being considered by the New Jersey legislature. Our panel of experts this evening are Martha Hickson. We're a little out of order, but Martha's a school librarian at North Hunterdon High School, and she was named the 2023 Librarian of the Year by the New Jersey Library Association, recognized for having fought multiple attempts to ban books from the library at her high school. Ms. Hickson will speak from the perspective she knows well, that of a school librarian. Meredith Kilburn is a Powell Legal Fellow at the Education Law Center in Newark, New Jersey, where she works to address the school-to-prison pipeline through direct representation of students and systemic advocacy around school resource officers. Additionally, Meredith assists with Education Law Center's research on censorship legislation in southern states. She will speak on the impacts of limiting educational materials on children, especially at risk in high-needs populations. Michael Gottesman is a retired attorney and graduate of Duke University and Vanderbilt Law School. He's the founder and president of the New Jersey Public Education Coalition. Their mission is to support public schools and ensure that every student has a safe, supportive, and welcoming place to learn, free from harassment, intimidation, and bullying. He will speak on the proposed legislation, the mechanisms it will put into place to protect librarians and school personnel, and the current status of the bill in the state legislature. And last, but certainly not least, we have Dr. Rozella Clyde. Rozella is a retired social studies educator and the co-chair of the League of Women Voters of New Jersey State Education Committee, as well as the League of Women Voters of the Morristown Area's Education Committee. Dr. Clyde will speak from the perspective of a classroom educator. Before we begin, I would like to explain the process for this evening's presentation. First, each panelist will introduce themselves and their positions within their organizations, and they will address the importance of students and educators having access to a diverse literature base reflective of their lives and interests. Then I will ask the panelists some questions prepared by our education committee. Following that, we will take questions from the audience. Because our time is limited and we want to get answers to as many questions as possible, we have asked the panelists to keep their answers to under 4 minutes. To keep us on track, our timekeeper, Diane Holland, will give the speakers a sign when they reach 3.5 minutes. Please use the cards provided by the League to write your questions legibly and indicate to whom it is directed. Please raise your hand if you have a completed card, and a member of the League will get it from you and bring it to us. Your questions must follow League policy of being concerned with the issues and not personalities. We will not allow any abusive, personal, or irrelevant questions or remarks. And I was going to say, to help ensure decorum, we are joined by Sheriff Nick, but will be here shortly. As a courtesy to the panel and audience, please turn off all cell phones and other electronic devices now. This session is being live streamed on the League of Women Voters of the Morristown Area's YouTube channel and will also be made available for viewing later this week. We're going to start off with statements from the panel. And why don't we start with, from far to near, Mike?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Gottesman, and as noted, I'm a retired attorney. Oh, I'm sorry.
My name is Mike Gottesman. I am a retired attorney and the founder of the New Jersey Public Education Coalition. I want to just tell you a little bit of my origin story on how I got involved in the public school space. About 3 years ago, I began to notice changes going on at school board meetings in my home district, which is Wayne, New Jersey. And what I noticed was there was a growing complement of people showing up at the meetings who were spouting disinformation and misinformation about what was going on at the schools, and basically pushing a very extreme policy that was anti-public schools. And at the time, my only granddaughter was 6 months old, and I looked at her and I said to myself, what are these schools going to look like in another 5 or 6 years when she begins attending? So I began speaking at meetings, and the result was this group of people would catcall me and interrupt me and call me names and call me a pornographer and a groomer and a pedophile, and then extended that onto Facebook, where they continued defamation of me on numerous large local Wayne Facebook pages. So I said, no wonder people aren't getting up and speaking on our side. They're afraid. What can we do to change that? So I created the coalition, and its motto is to engage first, because 60% of our residents didn't know what was going on, to educate so that people could discern the facts from the fiction. And we do education roadshows around the state to help people do that. And then finally, to help them grow collaborative groups within their local communities, so that if someone on our side wanted to go and speak, they'd have 20 or 30 people sitting there supporting them, and they'd develop a comfort level where they wouldn't be afraid to stand up and give views that are not, that are not in accordance with what the opposition was pushing. We've grown to over 2,500 members. We're celebrating our 2nd anniversary on May 1st. We do everything from pushing legislation to improve the schools, to speaking with our legislators to try to get them to modify bills that are currently up there. We speak before many organizations because it's important for us to get the word out about what's going on in our public schools right now, and how New Jersey has been targeted, and how important it is for us to get up and speak and oppose what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you. I am Martha Hickson. I have been a high school librarian at Northampton High School in Annandale, New Jersey for 19 years. And my recent experience, and I'm going to define recent as since 2019, is very similar to what you have heard from Mike. With help from my community, I have successfully defeated 6 attempts at censorship in our school library since 2019. And in the process of that work, book banners have called me by name a pornographer, pedophile, and groomer of children, simply for providing access to books that represent the real world and that depict the lives and experiences of LGBTQ+ people and other marginalized communities such as people of color. It's wonderful that we're having this forum this week. It is National Library Week, and just today the American Library Association released its State of America's Libraries report, and the numbers in here are frightening. Mike talked about the situation in Wayne, New Jersey. That's sort of a microcosm for what's happening around the country. The latest statistics from the American Library Association Office for Intellectual Freedom tell us that in 2023, across the United States, there were demands to remove more than 4,000 unique book titles from libraries. That is a 65% increase from the numbers observed in 2022, which was a high point at that time. If you compare those numbers to the annual average for the first 20 years of the 2000s, from 2021 to 2020, the average annual number of individual book titles that were challenged was 273. If you combine those first 20 years and add them all together, the number of book titles challenged was 3,600. So just last year, we exceeded the 20-year combined total by more than 600 titles. This surge in censorship started in 2021. It is not organic. It is not an individual parent talking about an individual book. It is organized and coordinated by groups like Moms for Liberty, No Left Turn in Education, who create lists of books that they deem to be inappropriate, and those lists are now being used to challenge books by the dozens, and in some cases by the hundreds, all at the same time. These challenges are happening in both school and public libraries. Last year, 54% of those challenges occurred in public libraries and 44% were in schools. And those attacks on books also come with attacks on library workers. Bomb threats, attempts to prosecute us. There were 151 bills introduced in state legislatures last year to prosecute librarians, threaten library funding, or impose unconstitutional content restrictions on books for children and teens. As Mike mentioned, this is all being driven by a disinformation campaign from organized pressure groups claiming that these books are dangerous, obscene, or pornographic. They are not. Professional school librarians are not bringing porn into your school libraries. The entire book banning movement is based on disinformation and trickery, using out-of-context passages and images selected to provoke fear, outrage, and snap judgments. If this concerns you, I've given you a handout. There's a URL on that handout, uniteagainstbookbans.org. Join it. Lots of resources for you there.
Thank you. Meredith?
Fun. Hi, I'm Meredith Kilburn. I'm a legal fellow and staff attorney at Education Law Center. You'll see, I just want to say thank you, Michael and Martha, for the incredible work you've been doing. ELC pursues justice and equality for public school students by enforcing their right to a high-quality education, and it does this through litigation, research and data analysis, policy advocacy, communications, and strategic partnerships. So I participate in ELC's advocacy on school safety issues, as well as assisting ELC's research on censorship laws and policies in southern states, in particular Arkansas, Alabama, Florida, and Tennessee, among others. So I read the Freedom to Read Act from a school safety perspective and in light of the laws that we're seeing in many southern states. Laws that do the opposite of the Freedom to Read Act. They limit what students and teachers can freely discuss and read, and they censor library and instructional materials. I think it's important. I think Martha and Michael have already touched on this, but the books most often banned or removed from libraries are those written by LGBTQ+ people and people of color, and that it detrimentally limits the viewpoints and perspectives to which students have access at school. It results in some students' lived experiences not being represented in library materials, and it sends a message about what students and identities are welcome in school. It shows what students' voices and identities are welcome and whose are unwelcome. And that is how book bans and censorship relate to school safety. Because the evidence and research show that supportive and trusting school environments are the strongest way to prevent school violence. And that includes harassment, intimidation, and bullying. The National Association of School Psychologists says that creating a positive school environment where students and staff feel physically and psychologically safe is the greatest method of violence prevention. Book bans do the total opposite of that. They make students feel less safe, less included, and less connected to their community. Additionally, book bans can result in school districts violating federal civil rights laws such as Title IX and Title VI. So that's the basis of my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Rozella.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rozella Clyde, and I serve, as Nancy said, as chair of both the Morristown Area League of Women Voters and am co-chair of the New Jersey League of Women Voters Education Committee. So I'm also the educational director of Kaleidoscope Educational Consultants, LLC. My PhD is in instructional design for online learning, and I retired as a social studies educator from the New York Public Schools after 44 years in the classroom back in 2012. Part of the time was spent, my time there was spent as a curriculum developer and as a staff developer where I mentored new teachers. I currently teach adult classes at Union College of Union County and at the Adult School of Madison and the Chathams. I'm also an active member of the New Jersey Council for the Social Studies, the National Council for the Social Studies, as well as the NJEA. And during my years in New York City, I was active in the New York State Council for the Social Studies and president of the Association of Teachers of Social Studies of the UFT, where I served as the president there for 6 years. So in my role as education co-chair for the state, I regularly monitor the New Jersey Board of Education meetings, and I represent the league on the Our Children, Our Schools, and the Healthy Schools Now coalitions. So we gather a lot of information about what's going on around the state through those coalitions. So I'm here tonight to share the educator's perspective with you. I have relied heavily throughout my teaching career on librarians and the resources that they call together. There are currently well-funded national initiatives to narrow and construct curricula for our pre-K through 12 classrooms, and even in our institutions of higher learning. So whereas Meredith is talking about school safety from harassment, I'm talking about learning conditions, enabling students to gather information and to form opinions. So we are a nation composed of many individuals from a wide variety of cultural backgrounds. One of the benefits of all of this diversity is the opportunity to enjoy a broad range of cooking styles and cuisines, to be entertained by a large range of entertainment options, and to learn how to celebrate holidays that have not been part of our own family practices. Librarians are often the best facilitators of that process. There is ample educational research that discusses the benefits to students when they can identify with people who look, act, and believe like they do in the instructional materials they use. Narrowing the curriculum and removing educational materials that are reflective of some students has a negative impact on all students. Students learn best in a nurturing environment where they can develop self-confidence and where those educators surrounding them celebrate their unique personalities and values. This situation is true not just for students from different ethnic or religious backgrounds, but also students whose families do not reflect the dominant nuclear family dynamic. Middle school is an extremely important time for young people, and we look in the middle school environment to apply the Laura Wooten law, which requires active civic engagement there. And I just want to close by saying that one of my favorite quotes comes from Khalil Gibran from his book, The Prophet, where he says that parents are the bows from which their children as living arrows are sent forth. And I think that we have to think about all of our children, because all of our children are our children.
Thank you. Thanks to all the panelists. Great introduction to the program. And so now we're going to get to the part where I will ask a few questions. If you have questions, please write them down. Raise your hand. We'll collect them, and then they'll be asked. So the first question I have from the Education Committee is, how does having educational materials reflective of their life context and experience impact a child's ability to learn and grow? Rozella, you kind of addressed that, but you want to take it again?
And we're going 4 minutes. Well, if you need.
So when we talk about the educational materials that students deal with in the classroom, the children's learning experience there are studies that demonstrate when children see themselves or their families reflected in the educational materials. That means the books that the literature that they read, the problems that they do in math class and things like that, they feel valued. And children who feel valued are nurtured and can learn much more effectively and efficiently. And we have a mandate through the state constitution of New Jersey to provide a thorough and effective education for every student. And so whether that student comes from a family with 2 moms or 2 dads, whether that student is going through questioning their own gender identity, they need to have this information in order to develop their own self-confidence and to reflect upon what their goals and aspirations are in a safe and secure environment. So it's really important that children have an opportunity to see themselves and to be lauded and valued themselves for who they are. We need to have an asset-based education, and it needs to go across the entire spectrum, and that's why it's really important that librarians have the opportunity to pull these materials together to provide library services, but it's also important for educators when they're selecting the materials that they're going to use in their own classroom discussions for students to see themselves and relate to it. If they don't relate to it, they're not going to learn as effectively. And those are some of the reasons why it's really important that, parents, there are policies in place where if a parent does not want their child to participate in a particular lesson, they can opt that child out. And every school district has a pattern, a program where they can opt their child out. But it's not fair that they try to control what other parents' children are learning. And that's one of the big issues that we have with so many of these, when I say narrowing the curriculum and book banning, we have this whole anti-critical race theory program that's been in part of the narrative for the last couple of years. And it's really impacting schools' ability because teachers are becoming, they're being threatened with being fired if they do something that has been criticized. And educators and librarians they're well trained. Everybody who's a teacher generally has around 7 years of post-high school educational experience. So I think that we should really allow the educators to be the determining factor and allow parents who want to opt their own children out of something, let them opt them out, but let's allow all the other children, all the other parents' children to have access to the materials that they need to see who they are.
If I could just make one.
If I could just make one quick comment. Much of what's going on and the comfort level of students in schools is a question of what message is being sent to them. When people are calling for the censorship of books that are relative to their background or their gender choice or their race or their religion, it sends a message to those children that they're not accepted. Many of you have probably heard about all this controversy going on about policy 5756, which has been in the news. It's the transgender policy that over 600 school boards in the state have, but a couple of dozen school boards are trying to remove it. It makes sure that the district complies with over 24 federal and state laws to protect transgender students. If they remove it, they still have to comply with those laws. But think about the message it sends to those students. It sends the message, you're not accepted, we don't want you here. And that's the real danger of those type of actions and of censoring these books above and beyond the ability of students to have access. It's the message we send to marginalized groups of students that you are not wanted, and that's a terrible message for them to receive.
It also sends a message to the dominant culture as well, as to here's who's valued and here's who's not. And I can tell you from my experience at my high school, where the focus has been primarily on LGBTQ+ books, the students from that community are facing increased harassment, increased bullying, one even received death threats because the bad behavior of the parents and the message that we don't want LGBTQ+ books here is now translated into we don't want LGBTQ+ people here, and the dominant culture acts on that.
Thank you. The next question we had is for Martha. What are the current challenges facing school and public librarians and other educators who rely upon them?
Well, the challenge that we're facing is the one that we're talking about here tonight, which is the attacks on books, the right to read, and the attacks on us as professionals. We are daily being called criminals, and there are states in this country who want to treat us exactly that way. They're threatening to arrest librarians, they are threatening to defund libraries, and a nightmare, I guess is the best way I can describe it. PEN America has called this current era the Ed Scare, reminiscent of the Red Scare of the 1950s, because that is what we're feeling. We have to watch who we talk to, what we say, what we do, what we buy, what we display in the library. Even some of the library displays, I know in June, when Pride Month comes up, there's a group called CatholicVote.org that urges its members to go to public libraries and literally dismantle the Pride displays by taking the books and hiding them in the library or checking them all out so that they can't be accessed. So we exist for the public good. We're here to serve everybody. We want everyone to see themselves represented in the library. And we also exist for free choice. You don't have to like everything in the library. You don't have to read everything in the library. You can choose what to pick up, what to put down, what to ignore. And we want to keep that free choice available for everyone. But there is a small but vocal minority that is out to make sure that does not happen. And when I say small, I mean really small. There's an excellent article by Hannah Nathanson of the Washington Post analyzing the book challenges that took place during from 2021 to 2022. Nationwide, 11 people were responsible for 60% of those book challenges. 11. How is that possible? Because they're challenging hundreds of books at a time. These book banners do not represent the vast majority of our population, so we need folks like you who are coming out to hear discussions like this to help us push back this small vocal minority.
Thank you. Mike, next question is for you. How would the proposed legislation help level the playing field in New Jersey?
Well,
I don't know whether I would consider it as much as, well, it's partially leveling the playing field, but it's also maintaining the playing field because of the attacks that are going on and the fact that they're getting traction in many boards of ed around the state because many boards have been taken over by extremist board members. So what I'd like to just briefly tell you is what's the current status of the landscape in public education in New Jersey in particular, and pretty much across the nation. What you have going on are outside organizations that are heavily funded and heavily organized, coming into our state, getting the ear of people that they can confuse with disinformation, and getting them on board to push their agendas and their dogma. And I can give you an example. Pacific Justice Institute is a California organization that claims they are a Christian law firm. That's the way they describe themselves. They've come into the state of New Jersey. They have tried to intervene in certain lawsuits. They have been sending emails to Board of Ed members telling them to object to this bill and providing them with form letters and providing them with form op-eds to send out. And mind you, this is an organization which has been classified as a hate group, an anti-LGBTQ hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center because they've said things like gay marriage is equivalent to the rise of Hitler and the Nazis in Germany. So that's the groups that are coming into our state using disinformation to confuse our residents. And as Martha said, the parents who agree with them are a small minority. And how do we know this? As a coalition, we did a thing called the Oprah Project last year with the help of the UCLA Law School and their students. And we sent out a record request to every single school district in the state about the new health and fitness curriculum, which they claim is a sex ed curriculum that's sexualizing our children, when in fact it's designed to protect our children from things like unwanted pregnancy and sexual abuse. And the results to the question that we posed, which was, how many parents opted their kids out of this curriculum as is their right under New Jersey law, was under 3%. Yet they claim to be a minority. And what this minority does is they are continuing to push a hate campaign against marginalized groups like LGBTQ, BIPOC, certain religious faiths, and it really is a white nationalist campaign. And now they claim, they come into board meetings now, and the latest threat at board meetings is they're saying to board members, you're going to be prosecuted under the federal obscenity laws if you keep doing what you're doing. And those are the same threats they're making against teachers and librarians. So, I mean, it's just a continuing campaign. They want to divide parents and teachers by claiming that teachers are pedophiles and gurus. They want to divide teachers from their union by claiming that the NJEA is politically biased and they're not really doing what they should do for their members because they want to weaken any institution that can fight against them and protect public education.
Excuse me, Mike, can you talk a little bit about the legislation and what's in it?
All of you should have gotten the sheet, and there's a breakdown on there on what the elements of this bill do for readers' rights, parents' rights, library rights, and librarians' rights. The bill addresses all the problems that are coming up. It protects librarians by creating a civil cause of action where a librarian can file suit against someone who harasses them. One of the important things, it does not take away parental rights. In fact, it formulates the content of the review committee for books. And it says that a parent has to be on that committee. It says that parents can say to their superintendent, administrator, principal, teacher, I don't want my child exposed to this book. Please don't allow my child to have access to it. And it enables parents with a process where they can challenge books. So this whole claim that it takes away parental rights and it takes away local control of the schools is just a flat-out lie. It protects it. And understand something. The bill doesn't just deal with public schools and their libraries. It also gives these protections and these processes to our public libraries, which are also under attack. The Cedar Grove Library was recently under attack with challenges to books and challenges to their removal policy. So effectively what this bill is trying to do is protect readers, parents, librarians, and the general public. That's what it's designed to do by creating uniformity of process across all the venues across the state.
Thank you, Mike. So Meredith, the next question is for you. Which children seem to be at the greatest risk or potential harm as the current debate plays out in local school board meetings?
Again, I think it's students of color and LGBTQ plus students those are the books, the authors and the characters within the books who, those are the books being banned, and those are the students most likely to be experiencing hostility because of those bans. But I think more broadly, it negatively impacts all students. And I think on the first point, the United States Department of Education Office for Civil Rights in May 2023 released a complaint investigation report on about Forsyth County schools in Georgia. And basically the school district had received complaints about certain books. The school district did an investigation, a screening on what they called sexually explicit books. It resulted in some books being indefinitely excluded. And at a board meeting, to paraphrase what some of the students said, so one student stated that the book ban immediately made the environment more harsh for students, and it felt like he was watching safe spaces disappear. Another student who identified as Asian said it was hard for her to find books with main characters who share her racial identity, and that banning books mainly silences underrepresented voices. Another student said the district was singling out books by authors who were gay, support the LGBTQ+ community, who are women, or who are people of color, and that made them feel like the district did not care about diversity. At the end of the day, the school district was found out of compliance with Title IX and Title VI, and not because of the screening process within itself, because of how the screening process resulted in a hostile environment. And I think that just demonstrates some of the harms that Martha and Michael are talking about, that even if the screening process is fair, it's the rhetoric, it's the narrative around why these books are being banned and what they stand for. And it found that the Office for Civil Rights found that students feared harassment due to their identities because of these book bans. So I think that it demonstrates how students with specific identities in particular are going to be harmed, but more generally, I think I found a quote from the Harvard Graduate School of Education that I think shows how books from diverse perspectives benefit us all. That students who can find books about their experience or their lives, or that offer alternative perspectives, have far better educational outcomes. It also distracts from underfunding of schools and the fact that, as Nicholas Kristof wrote in a recent op-ed, that only 32% of American fourth graders are proficient in reading. There's understaffing issues, underfunding issues. I found another opinion essay from a Philadelphia teacher entitled "Book Bans." My school doesn't even have a library. So I think it harms a lot of different students in different ways.
Thank you. The next question is for all of you, whoever wants to take it, and it is, why should people without children in the public school system still be concerned about these discussions?
I will take, Martha, you want to go first?
Yeah. Let Martha go first.
I'll be brief. There's two ways of looking at this. I'll go with the pocketbook one first, which is, if you are a property owner, the value of your property is very closely tied to the quality of your public schools. So when you start eroding the right to read, the right to a full and comprehensive education, the right to learn, you are now attacking your public school and attacking your own property value. Then there's the more altruistic point of view, which is, we live in the United States of America, founded on freedom. We want to be part of a diverse and inclusive community, and that diverse and inclusive community includes diverse and inclusive literature. So when you attack the library, when you attack the books, you're also attacking the First Amendment, the freedom to read, and that sense of inclusion and community.
I don't want to tell you how many times in the past 3 years I have been told, you have no right to speak at this meeting. You don't have a child in the system. Thankfully, God bless, I have a granddaughter now, so I have a direct answer to that. But the real answer to that, as Martha just said, is I am a homeowner that pays property taxes in my town. And the last election campaign, we had a short social media spot that basically was entitled, "You Can't Afford to Have an Extremist School Board," because they cost your district money, because they get your district sued. And that comes out of your taxpayer's pocket. And that's another reason why you have the right to be involved in these decisions and speak at meetings. And I emphasize it to the senior community, of which I am now a part, that if anyone ever says that to you, they are lying to you. You have every right and every vested interest that anyone who has a child in school has in ensuring that your district is run in a manner that makes it exceptional. Because an exceptional school district makes your property rise. It also prepares from an altruistic standpoint, it gives all of those kids the best possible education they can get and the best possible opportunity to be successful. And I spoke with a group of college students this past weekend, and I emphasized to them that they have to be involved in these issues. And they can't say it really doesn't matter who gets elected because it doesn't impact me and there's nothing that they're doing that interests me, because it is their country to inherit and it is their country to mold going forward. And it's up to them to make sure that we remain a growing democracy and not something else.
And just picking up on what Mike said, from a very personal point of view, if children do not go get a thorough and efficient education, and they come out of school unprepared to participate in the workforce, to participate in they're not going to be paying into Social Security, which is what pays for my Medicare right now. My Medicare right now.
I think Meredith would probably like to answer that one too, right?
I don't want to. It's a crisis of democracy. Like, book banning is a crisis of democracy, and it is going to disproportionately impact certain communities of color, LGBTQ plus communities, even more so. So it doesn't as someone who doesn't have children, period. I'm from South Carolina, and I grew up hearing certain narratives, and if I didn't have the freedom to read books, then my perspective would be a lot different than it is now. And I see all these laws in South Carolina and other southern states that are denying history, and it's terrifying because there's already enough of a problem with institutionalized racism in everywhere in the United States, but especially in the South. And how are we going to teach the truth if we're banning books that show us a picture of our country that's hard to look at? But that's democracy. So
One last quick point, there's also a big resource and efficiency issue here. In the 2021-2022 school year, there were 5 books challenged simultaneously in my school district. I cannot begin to calculate the number of hours I personally devoted to that issue. Then you bring in the fact that there's an assistant principal, a superintendent, a board, all focused on this. I did calculate that it cost roughly $1,600 per book challenged to reconsider and deal with that issue. $8,000, that's just, time and materials, and doesn't even calculate the opportunity cost lost. Who was I not teaching? What display was I not putting up? What student was I not helping when I was doing all this other work to deal with book bans?
Thank you. Martha, this next question is for you again. How are materials deemed to be appropriate? What type of measurements are used?
Well, basically you're talking about how books get into a library when you're asking that question. There are policies and processes that are followed, but it all begins with a professional librarian. A professional librarian is one who attends the American Library Association accredited library school to obtain a master's degree. That master's degree education includes training on youth literature, collection management, and collection development, among many other things. So we come out prepared. As I said earlier, I have 19 years of experience under my belt. That helps too. So we come into, I'm going to speak from a school perspective, we come into a school building, we also have policies that we must deal with. For a school district that uses the Strauss-Essenay policy manual, the policy that is important to me is policy 2530, which is on library materials. It contains selection criteria that I must follow. Things like supporting the curriculum, stimulating growth for students, showing opposing sides of issues, representing society, being relevant to today's world, having artistic, literary, historical, and scientific quality. There are similar selection criteria that are provided to us by the American Library Association. So I have all those criteria kind of tattooed in my brain. Then I'm taking a look, analyzing my collection every year to see where are there gaps, listening to my staff and students about what they're asking for. With all of that in mind, I then go out and I read hundreds and hundreds of professional book reviews. What's a professional book review? It's one that appears in a professional journal like Kirkus, Publishers Weekly, Book List, School Library Journal, where highly qualified book reviewers are reviewing the content and giving a recommendation or not. From those book reviews, I pull the very best that I can afford and have shelf space for. I can't buy everything, right? I make a recommendation list. That list of recommendations then goes to an assistant principal for review, then to the principal for review, then to the superintendent for review. After all those levels of review, it gets signed off, sent to the business office for a purchase order. That purchase order then goes to a state-approved school library book distributor. Most often for us in school libraries, that's either Follett or Mackin. I assure you that a state-approved school library book distributor does not sell porn. They could not stay in business if they sold porn. Therefore, there is no porn in a school library.
Thank you. Somebody want to say something?
One quick point.
Okay.
Martha mentioned where she goes, professional journals and professional reviews. Just to show you quickly how insidious the other side is. There is a website called booklooks.org. And this website, when you go to it, looks like a reputable book review website. Until you realize that they cherry pick certain lines out of context in reviewing books. And then at the bottom, they tell you how many times each four-letter word is mentioned in the book. And that's because this website was created by none other than Moms for Liberty to confuse people and to provide their supporters with bogus information that they can bring into school board meetings.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the audience question portion of the meeting. First, do you have questions for me, Judy? I do have one here, and unfortunately the person who asked it had to step out. No, he's still here. I think he had to take his kids, probably the children's library. So I'm going to hold that one in case until he comes back. Thank you. Yes, he did. Thanks. Okay, this one is for Mr. Gottesman. Do you find that people attending school board meetings are all local parents? If not, who is sending these people? And how can we engage everyone in a free and considerate in a free and considerate discussion of issues?
The people that attend school board meetings are not all local people. In fact, many of the organizations that have entered our state and organizations that have been created and grown in our state, like the New Jersey Project, bring people from all over the state. They have fundamentalist churches that bring their congregations in the busloads. There are people like the Reverend Quinlan from the Center for Garden State Families who shows up at every meeting and disparages the LGBTQ community and makes false claims, but that's expected from a person whose entire resume is a lie. So they bring people in. And to be fair, I travel around the state when asked and appear and speak at board meetings at the request of people from that community. And as part of that process of making parents comfortable, we have a thing called the squadron alert. When we find that something funky is going on with a school board or some action may be taken that we think is inappropriate, we let our members throughout that entire county know. But they only appear for support. They don't speak. We leave it to the local residents to do that because it's their school district and they represent the values of their school district And they're the ones that should be expressing their opinion to the school board members.
Thank you. This is a question for Martha. Your fight to protect reading freedom was well publicized. What is the continuing impact on students today? And where are these objections to classroom material as well? Were these objections to classroom materials as well?
There were some objections to classroom material that weren't as widely publicized, but primarily it's been library. But it doesn't necessarily need to rise to the level of a challenge for it to affect the classroom. You can imagine if you have a colleague who's being called a pornographer, pedophile, and groomer at a board meeting, and your Board of Education sits silently and lets that happen. Your administrators greet that information with accusation and antagonism, then all other professionals in the building are on watch. So that begins a process of self-censorship, which is really what all of this is designed to do. It's time intensive for book banners to be coming month after month to board meetings, right? So if they can scare the living daylights out of one staff member in the building and then get everybody else to sort of close up shop on their own, well then we end up doing the book banners work for them. In terms of how it's affecting the student community, I am delighted to say that my staunchest supporters are my students. In the 2021-2022 situation, they came out month after month and spoke at that podium. They were models for public discourse. Whereas the adults at the podium were screaming and ranting and raving and you had to get the hook to get them away from the microphone, the kids came prepared. They delivered, point after point within their 3-minute allotment, and then they sat down. But they got to the board. The board has to listen to those kids. That's who they're there to serve. And man, did they do a great job. They did such a great job that the New Jersey Library Association in June of 2022 gave the Gender and Sexuality Alliances in the 2 schools in our district its Intellectual Freedom Award for their role in saving those 5 books. And I'm proud to say that the kids who were involved in that situation then are still involved, because I'm going through another book challenge right now, and those same kids are lining up behind me saying, what can I do? When's the next board meeting? Who can I bring? What should I say? So it's firing up the kids, and it's scaring the staff.
It's an awesome lesson in civic engagement. Something we try to promote all the time. Okay, here's another one. New Jersey supports local decision-making. Does the Freedom to Read Act allow for local school districts and libraries to set policy that is supportive of their communities?
I'll hop on that, and maybe I have something to say too, Mike. But yes, it does. To my mind, as a librarian, one of the great things that the Freedom to Read Act does is it requires school and public libraries to have selection policies and challenge policies, because believe it or not, some libraries have neither. So it requires that those exist. And that's terrific for parents and community members too, because if you do have a concern about a book, then if there is a challenge policy required, you know what your complaint route is. You don't have to go and attack a librarian personally, you can follow the challenge process. Now, the bill mentions that there will be model policies provided by the state library. Emphasis on the word model. Those are not required, you're not required to use that language, that structure, whatever. The control of your library policies will remain with your local school board and your local library board. As long as the policy that they create complies with the components of the bill, it's local control.
This is the
home rule question. I'm sure many of you have heard that phrase. And it's one of the big arguments that the opposition tries to make, is that big bad government's coming in and taking away home rule. The fact is, acquisition decisions are made locally. Challenges are made locally. They're heard by a review committee made up generally by the superintendent, media specialist, members of the duly elected Board of Education, and at least one parent. And the law says that there should be a parent on that committee. So it's nonsense when they say that local control is being taken away, because it's all done locally.
The other element of local control that's in there is that only persons with a vested interest in that community's library may challenge a book. That means you need to be a resident of the community. As we've seen across the country, in some situations, there are people who don't even live in the state who are attempting to file challenges. So this bill would get rid of that.
Great. The Freedom to Read bill has stalled. What is the reason, and what is the status of the bill at this point?
Well, I don't think it's fair to say it's stalled. It's working its way through the legislative process. So it is now under review, and there are amendments being written, and we're hopeful that we will see it make its way to committee later this spring.
Thank you. This is a multi-question, there's a lot of questions on this card. It's all related to the same thing. What is driving these groups like Moms for Liberty is the first question. How are they funded? Where have they come from? Who are the 11 leaders at the high level? And what is their misinformation? You can take any one of those if you want.
You have to understand that what's going on in our public schools is not new. This is a 40-year battle, which has come to a head now. And I don't like to be political, but I have to be honest. Because the extremely conservative white nationalist element has gained a foothold. And in particular, in a train wreck of the Republican Party right now. And I think we can all agree that it's like the tail wagging the dog. Where is the money coming from? It's the same dark money that has been promoting political campaigns, getting conservative judges appointed to the Supreme Court. It's organizations like the Heritage Foundation, organizations run by conservative billionaires who have more than enough money to spend on anything except for providing for the people that are really in need in our country. So those are the organizations that are doing it, and they operate through multiple series of political action committees, and they coordinate and orchestrate organizations and people within our state. Now, recently we got a hold of an email that was sent by the Pacific Justice Institute to the board members, telling them to write an editorial, write to their senators. And foolishly, that email contained their distribution list. So we know every single one of the people in New Jersey that they are now sending these emails to. And guess what? There are 2 assemblymen on that list. There are numerous Board of Ed members on that list, as well as the leaders of the organizations that we know are working on the effort to weaken public schools and the ultimate goal of eliminating public schools and replacing them with religious and private schools that have absolutely no government supervision.
Just a couple of other quick points. There was an aspect in there about the 11 people. So the 11 people that I referenced from that Washington Post article, these aren't necessarily, say, the leadership of Moms for Liberty. These are 11 individuals who are filing multiple book challenges. The Washington Post refers to them as serial filers. For example, there's an individual down in Clay County, Florida. His name is Bruce Friedman. He moved from New York to Florida specifically for the purpose of banning books. And he has stated that his goal is to ban at least 3,800 titles that he has identified. And the quote from him is, anyone who gets in his way, he will run them over like a dead body. So that's the 11. The other individual I want to point you to in terms of where does this all come from is Christopher Rufo. He is from the Manhattan Institute, which is a conservative think tank. He's now heavily involved in New College in Florida in terms of dismantling its DEI program, women's studies program, all of that. The one good thing I can say about Christopher Rufo is he is transparent. He tells you what he's going to do, and then he does it. So if you want, sort of a crystal ball as to what's going to happen next, listen to what Christopher Rufo says. And another aspect that's important in all of this is ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is a group that gets together to brainstorm legislation and then helps foment it from state to state. That's been involved here with some of these horrible pieces of legislation attacking libraries. And lastly, on Moms for Liberty, in terms of its funding and relationships, they had their national conference last summer in Philadelphia. Every major Republican candidate spoke at that conference, including Donald Trump. They have deep and strong ties.
Thank you. I think. Here's another question. What is the to-do list, this is a good one, you'd give us, the public, to fight this issue, besides supporting legislation?
Let me start with that, with the to-do list. And one of the things is that we have to always counter disinformation. And I think that that's one of the most important things. We have to educate ourselves as to what the arguments are that don't make sense. And then we have to refute them in any opportunity we have. And I think that having a panel together like this gives you an opportunity to scratch the surface of this and see. When you talk about Christopher Rufo was also the person that started defining critical race theory as anything he didn't like. And I think there has been a backlash in this country since the election, since the Obama administration. There's been a whole backlash against a whole series of different groups of people. And the whole anti-trans situation, I find it mind-boggling. I don't understand why people are so concerned how another person lives their lives. But I think that when you talk about the to-do list, you have to take the opportunity when you speak to somebody, and you can't demonize people. These people that are creating these hostilities are the ones who are doing the demonizing. We have to disperse that concept, and I think it's very important to just, when you're having casual conversations with somebody, not let something slide when you know that what they're saying is hurtful to somebody else. And a whole lot of this rhetoric is very, very hurtful. It's hurtful to the children, it's hurtful to the educators, it's hurtful to anybody who's on the policy decision making, and it's just a lot of noise, and that can be confronted.
The first thing on your to-do list, and in New Jersey right now, we don't know exactly what the ballots are going to look like, because the party line has been ruled, at least for the Democratic primary, has been ruled unconstitutional. But the current ballot setup right now, one of the things that the opposition learned, in particular from the gubernatorial election in Virginia, is we no longer can look at the ballot from the top down. We have to look at it from the bottom up. And they used that strategy over the past 2 or 3 election cycles. And what do I mean by that? Local matters. So what most people do is, they say, okay, this is my candidate for president, and with very few exceptions, I'm just going to vote down the line, and oh, you mean I have to vote for Board of Ed members? I don't know anything about them. I'll just choose 1, 2, and 3. And one of the things that we've been doing with organizations like Action Together New Jersey and Sweep NJ is we want you to know which candidates stand for what, especially at the Board of Ed level, because that's going to have a dramatic impact on your town and your property values, as we mentioned, and many other things. So we can't let people go into that voting booth not knowing anything about their Board of Ed candidates. So the first thing is make sure you know and vote appropriately. The second thing is talk to everyone you can. Now, I tell my members all the time, there are some people you're not going to be able to change their mind. So don't waste your energy and don't waste your breath. Look to those people that haven't been educated yet, or don't know, or haven't made up their mind. That's the group that you need to get to. Those are the people that you have to impress and say how important Board of Ed elections are and how important every level is, but in particular now Board of Ed, because that's where they're taking over our communities. And make sure that they know where to look. And you can go to our website in particular, and I've got a bunch of cards, everyone can grab one on the way out. And we direct you to places and organizations where you can get that information. And in the election cycle, we produce a list of what we call like-minded candidates. And those are the candidates who support our goals in public education. And what we see as the future of public education for every child, a place where every child feels safe and comfortable in a place of learning where they're not being harassed or intimidated and bullied. And isn't that what we want for every one of our children?
Thank you, Mike.
I'll just underscore what Mike said regarding boards of education with a quote from Steve Bannon, who said on the floor of CPAC last August that boards of education are the key that picks the lock. The other side of this issue has a laser-like focus on boards of education because it's sort of a low-effort entry point for them. So in addition to educating yourself about the candidates and voting, go to those Board of Education meetings. If you can't make it there physically, most of them are live streamed, or you have the audio that you can watch. And here's really, go rogue. Think about running for Board of Education yourself, or if you have neighbors or friends who would make great candidates, encourage them to. Last two things on your to-do list. I already talked about uniteagainstbookbans.org. Join it, and the website there has a ton of resources for you. And last but not least from me, in terms of moving the Freedom to Read Act forward, write to your legislators, urging them to either co-sponsor or support the Freedom to Read Act. And there's a URL on your handout where you can do that very easily.
And if you are willing to run for board, or you know someone who might, but they're saying to yourselves, or you're saying to myself, I don't know if I can do it, I don't know what to do. We have a program called Board Boost. And Board Boost, it's run with several organizations, and soup to nuts, we teach you what it is to run a board campaign, and how to run it, and how to find funding, and how to address every single issue in a board campaign. And if you go through the Board Boost program, well, you know you're going to end up on our like-minded list, so you get the support of our organizations as well.
Thank you, Mike. In terms of boards of education, this is a group that sponsors Board of Ed debates every year, every election, and thankfully we're all pretty good about getting that information out. It's just a matter of getting people to be willing to debate and to participate, and people to be willing to come out. Meredith, did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
I do, but
Okay.
that's also terrifying that Steve Bannon is the one who said that. I agree with what everybody has said, and in particular, Rozella, what you said about countering the misinformation is getting informed about not only coming here to this panel about the Freedom to Read Act, but about all the other the land desegregation to disciplinary disparities. I think housing segregation, it's all connected. And I think that definitely running for the school board is very helpful. And from my perspective, what I see a lot is I largely work on school discipline cases, and it's like, if you're at the school board, you have a say in whether a child gets to stay in school. And I think just being educated about the disparities, the racial disparities, the disparities in students with disabilities, and all the issues and how connected they are to each other, and how they're feeding into the book bans we're seeing.
Thank you. We need to be out of here by 8:30, we need to close by 8:30.
By quarter to.
Oh, good. Okay, close. So the next part of the program was to have all of our panelists make some closing remarks. So why don't we move to that? Unless 2-minute closing remarks. Then why don't we start with Rozella now and go.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for coming out for this program, and those people watching us on live stream. I think that's extremely important. And one of the missions of the League of Women Voters is to defend democracy. And this is what we're talking about right now. We're talking about providing a safe, democratic education for every student in our state. And we've talked about how we all benefit when our children are well educated and feel comfortable in their own skin. And I think that's what's really important about what we're doing. And the fact that this is a concerted effort, I think, really to get rid of public education in many ways. And we need public education. We need for so many different reasons. But one of the most important things about public education is that there is oversight. People do have an idea of what's going on. And in the private schools, you don't really know what's going on. There's not the same kind of transparency. So that's why we have to keep moving forward, and we have to be as supportive of individuals of children in particular, but also of people who are involved in education. And we're all involved in education in one way or another.
Rozella, I feel like you covered it. I very quickly on the public education front, I will plug another issue that ELC works on a lot is school vouchers and public funds for public schools. New Jersey legislators are considering a New Jersey voucher. So I would just encourage you to be aware of that legislation. I don't have the legislative number, but yeah.
A4144S3035.
I hope you heard that, because I don't know. But again, I feel like I can't say anything better than what has already been said here tonight by everybody here. But I have a quote from Alex Ebel, who works at the Teachers College at Columbia University, that what people see affects who they become, what they believe about themselves, and also what they believe about others. That not having equitable representation robs people of seeing the full wealth of the future that we can all inhabit. And at their core, I think book bans are trying to rob students of that future.
Well, I'm going to devote my 2 minutes to saying thank you, which I don't get to do often enough. Thank you first to the League for hosting this forum tonight. Thank you all for having the interest to come out. I really appreciate it. And you are sort of a symbol of the larger community that I have to thank. I could not have survived these last 5 years fighting book bans without the community with and behind me. I work with a wonderful group called the North Hundred and Voorhees Intellectual Freedom Fighters, and without them encouraging me, giving me support, coming out to board meetings, none of our success would have been possible. And through that community involvement is how I met Senator Zwicker last April. He heard me speaking in a forum very much like this and came up to me afterwards. It was really the first he had heard about what was going on in our school district and said, how can I help from a legislative perspective? And I directed him to Illinois, where at that time there was legislation on Governor Pritzker's desk, an anti-book ban bill. This was April. Senator Zwicker took a look at that And by June, he had proposed a bill for New Jersey. So a huge thank you to Senator Zwicker. And the bill that we're currently looking at evolved from that activity. So he listened, he cared, he acted. What more can you want from a government official? And then lastly, I need to say thank you to my students. They are the ones who keep me motivated. And that's what this is really all about. Echoing Meredith, I'm going to end with a quote from the great educator and librarian icon, Rudine Sims Bishop, who said, "Literature transforms human experience and reflects it back to us. In that reflection, we can see our own lives and experiences as part of the larger human experience. When we take away a book, I believe we're taking away a person and their experience. That's valuable, and we can't let it go."
First, I'd just like to say, as Martha mentioned, Senator Zwicker is one of the good guys. He is a true champion for us all, not only in this regard, but in protecting all marginalized communities. I am thankful to know him and call him a friend. I'd like to also thank the lead for having this tonight, for the moderator, my co-panelists, to all of you who came tonight, those who are watching on Zoom, and hopefully a ton of you who will watch the replay.
Thank you. And now it's my turn to thank the panel for being here and sharing your wisdom with us. I think we all learned a lot. I want to thank all of you who came out today, Rozella and her committee for thinking of this panel and putting it together, and everyone watching us on YouTube. I also want to make a couple of quick announcements. Next Monday, the League of Voters of the Morristown Area is having a social, a purely social event at the Famished Frog at 5:30 in the sidebar. And in terms of civics education, I don't know how many of you realize we are very involved in a program called Energizing Young Voters, where we go into middle school right now and teach middle school students about civics, and in an interactive way. And we're in the middle of we're about to start the spring run of schools, and if anyone is interested in participating in that, just let me know, and we'll make sure you get trained. And there's a ton of material. It's a really rewarding experience, so you're more than welcome to talk to us about that later. And let's see, the debates for the primaries will be in April and May, and on May 15th, the State League of Voters of New Jersey is having their Making Democracy Work event at the Madison Hotel. We are the host league, so I hope lots of you will come out. It's always a very fun night. We are honoring people for making democracy work, including our Secretary of State, Tahisha Way. I wasn't supposed to take the power of names, but does somebody have? Oh, here it is. Here it is. Sorry about that. CJ Griffin, Director of the Justice Gary Stein Public Interest Center. She's been very helpful to all of us on the Oprah bill that we're all fighting. She's a wealth of information on Oprah, and she's been sharing that with us. The New Jersey Monitor, an independent, nonprofit, nonpartisan news site that strives to be a watchdog for all residents of the Garden State. And Sarah Pena, Director of External Affairs at PSCG, also a member of the New Jersey Legal of Voters Advisory Council. So hopefully we'll see a lot of you on May 15th, and you can see us for, there's actually handouts that look like this around the room. So again, thank you all for coming and for participating, and have a good night.